Okay, so we're all sharing live now in the group. So thanks to everyone who joins in and watches today. Want to introduce you all to Christina McDonald. Thanks so much for joining us, Christina. What, sorry. So Christina's a US Today best-selling author of Do Not Harm, Behind Every Lie, and The Night Olivia Fell, which has been optioned for television by a major Hollywood studio. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Her writing has been featured in the Sunday Times, Dublin, usatoday.com, and Expedia. Originally from Seattle, she has a BA in communications from the University of Washington and an MA in journalism from the National University of Ireland. She now lives in London, England, with her husband, two sons, and their dog Tango, and she's currently working on her next novel. And Christina enjoys reading, hiking, lifting weights, and the gym, and she always wanted to be a writer and told her earliest stories to her two younger sisters, who were her first audience, cheerleaders, and sounding board. So that all is really great, and thanks so much for joining us. And just
Thank you
wanted
so
to
much for
let
having me.
everyone know I just read The Night Olivia Fell
Ah.
and really, really loved it. It was a 5 out of 5 for me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it like really wanted me to keep reading it. It really, really draws you in and wanted me to know what was happening.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
So thanks for joining us. Would you like to tell us anything else about yourself or maybe your latest book?
Yeah, so I guess anything else about myself. I guess I've written three books, so that's the first thing. I've written three books. The first was The Night Olivia Fell. The second is called Behind Every Lie, and my third, which came out in February, is called Do No Harm. And Do No Harm is about a doctor whose son is diagnosed with a very rare form of leukemia. And in order to save up the money that she needs to get him this very rare, very expensive treatment, a life saving treatment, she turns to selling opioids. And so she sets
Oh.
up an opioid drug ring.
Mm,
Um, and obviously, somebody ends up dead because this is a very dangerous thing that
mm.
she's decided to do. So somebody ends up dead, and the person who ends up investigating her is her own husband, who is the town's lead detective.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of this game of cat and mouse, and her, my protagonist Emma, finding out and trying to discover, like, do the ends justify the means, even if you're trying to save somebody you love.
Mm, sounds interesting.
Thank you.
So I said that you'd always wanted to be a writer. Did you, how long did it take for you to actually live your dream and become a writer, like have your first book published and
Oh, a long time. I mean,
mm,
so when I was a kid, I wrote, fairy tales and just little stories for my sisters.
mm,
The first story I ever wrote was a fairy tale, and it was about the girls with golden hair. And there were these three girls, obviously my sisters and me, who had golden hair, and they wanted more than anything in the world to buy all the sweets that they could eat. And so they learned that they had golden hair, like real gold hair. So they cut their hair and they
oh.
sold it to the bank, and they got all the money that they needed to buy the sweets they wanted, and they lived happily ever after. So I mean, I moved from that, which was very obviously a fairy tale, to, as I got older, poetry and romance, and then trying to do historical fiction, and eventually, kind of accidentally, actually, when I wrote The Night Olivia Fell, it was more a mystery, like it had that suspense element,
Mm,
and I didn't mean to put it into that genre. It just sort of happened that that's the way that was the story I was trying to tell, and that was the way I loved telling stories. And so I think that that's the reason why, is because I love reading that kind of story, so it seemed very natural that I wrote that type of story as well. But I mean, it took me years to figure out what genre I wanted to be in. And in fact, before I did this, before I turned to writing books, I got a master's degree in journalism, so I was a journalist. And
mm,
I because I thought, gosh, you can't really make a lot of money being an author, right?
mm,
So I'll get a real job. And I became a journalist, and from there I moved into digital copywriting and worked for various websites writing their copy for the websites. And then one day I was like, I still want to write a book. And so I sat down and wrote a number of books before The Night Olivia Fell.
Okay.
The Night Olivia Fell is the
Yeah.
first book I got published, but most authors will tell you they have a lot of books that didn't get published
Yeah.
first.
So had you
So,
tried
know,
to get those
yeah.
others published, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, for one of them, I even got an agent, and it got to the publisher level, but no publisher bought it.
Okay.
So, and I think this is a very common story, is that it seems like authors just randomly get published, but they don't. There have been a lot of stories that they've written first. And usually each book takes, upwards of a year to write, to edit, to get, to where it's polished enough to get to an agent. So then when you get an agent and get to the publisher level and find out it hasn't sold, I mean, that's pretty devastating. And then you're kicked back to the beginning. You have to start a new book. So there is a lot of kind of start, stop, and then going back to the beginning and starting over again, and then having to go out, on submission to agents or publishers. There's a lot of work involved in a lot of years. So it's taken me a long time to get to where Olivia was published.
Yeah. And have all your books been like this sort of suspense?
Yeah, so I've had 3, and Olivia was more kind of domestic drama and suspense, whereas I think Do No Harm has gone more into the thriller genre, but they're all definitely, there's that mystery thriller element to them. There's a bit of suspense. And I think that's probably just my genre. That's just what I love writing. It's what I love reading. So I'll stick to that.
Yeah. And I said that it had been optioned for movie. Whereabouts is that at?
So it's been optioned for TV with a production company in Hollywood. But everything's on hold. I mean, with COVID and everything, I mean, who knows? I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah. And could you tell us a little bit about if you had anyone who really supported you with your writing throughout your life?
I mean, the biggest supporter I've had is from my husband, and I don't let people read my manuscripts before I send it to my agent. I don't have like a book club group or a support network where I will send it out, because I think the opinions are so subjective that I don't want to get bogged down with another writer or a peer or a friend saying, well, actually I didn't like this, because you know what, somebody else might. So I don't really have that. I send my first draft to my agent, but before that I always do have my husband read it, and he tells me if it makes sense and if there's any like glaringly obvious plot holes. So he would be my biggest support. And anytime, I mean, ask any writer, like, you might have a certain level of success that it appears that you have, but there's always 10,000 failures that are happening in the background. So he's always been the first person that says, this is just a disappointment, it's just a step back, get up and keep going, you know. So in that way, he's been amazing.
Yeah, that's great. And you said that you had some books you'd written that hadn't been published. Have you ever tried to go back and fix them up or make them better or anything to?
I haven't. I think it would be really difficult to do, because I mean, they were useful because I've learned so much in terms of character arc, character development, plot, the way that tension kind of plays out within this genre. So I feel like I've learned so much that I'm not sure I could actually fix those books. I'd have to just rewrite them with maybe the same premise, but just rewrite them entirely. So I've never gone back. I've just gone forward. And I don't think I would. I mean, I think that the ideas I have and the passion that I have for a story, they're usually new ones, not the previous ones. So they'll probably just always sit languishing in a drawer.
And I'm interested to know, do you do much research for your books? Yeah,
well, it depends on the book, but certainly with Do No Harm, because there was that medical aspect to it, where the kid has leukemia. I didn't know a lot about leukemia, so there was a lot of research in there. I did a number of interviews with doctors and lots of online research. I had a doctor read the final draft just to make sure that everything was authentic. And same with so one of my main characters is a detective in, the husband in Do No Harm. And I don't know what it's like to be a detective. So I had to reach out and I interviewed somebody who is a detective, and I found out all of the things that they do in a day and how they would approach different scenarios. So there was a lot of research involved for that one. The night Olivia fell, there was quite a lot as well, because again, there was a little bit of a medical aspect there right at the beginning. So just finding out, what's the legality of keeping a woman on life support if she is brain dead and pregnant? Like, how does that work
Mm,
within the confines of the setting of the story?
mm,
And so my story was set, Olivia was set in Washington State. So I needed to really look up the legality of what they do there. So there was a lot of research for that. Less so for my second book. So I think it depends
okay.
on the book, but I do a fair amount of research just because I want my characters and my setting and everything about the book to be completely authentic. So I
Yeah.
do a fair amount of research.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. And has ever, when you've been doing your research, you've come across something that's really, really surprised you?
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think. I mean, I come across surprising stuff all the time. When
Mm,
you're researching, you do get dragged down into these really weird little
mm,
black holes on the internet. The internet has crazy stuff on there, and I research within the thriller and murder line. So if the
yeah.
FBI or whatever was ever going to come and look at my computer, there's a lot of weird stuff on there. But Do No Harm was probably the most interesting because I found out that, and some of these bits showed up in the book as well. So, for example, in America, this treatment that the little boy has to have, it's called CAR T-cell immunotherapy, and it genuinely costs $500,000, and it is not
Oh,
covered by insurance.
wow.
So if you're a parent and your child is diagnosed with this illness, that that can be, his life can be saved if you pay $500,000. I mean, what do you do? It's
Yeah.
just such an impossible situation. So when I found
Mm.
that out, and that it is not covered by insurance and you just have to get the cash, then I was like, okay, I've got a story here.
Yeah. And we've got a few people watching and we've got a couple of questions. So just
Sure.
reminding people if they do want to ask any questions to type them in comments. So Anne Lee's wondering where she can buy your books from in Australia. So I just wanted to say that I bought your book from Book Depository, I think it was, online. And I know
Yeah.
I've seen it also on Booktopia, which is an Australian online book buying place, and also, of course, Amazon as well. So I don't
Okay,
know if
good.
there's, yeah, are there any that
Yeah, I
you're
don't I don't
aware of?
know really the distribution that is available.
Mm,
Because my publisher is in America, I'm not
mm,
I don't really know the
yeah,
different shops, but I do know that it is on Book Depository. So
yeah,
that's it. And
yeah.
Amazon, of course, has it as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So I'm interested to know how you get the event, like the events about your book and that. Is it something that you've heard about or something that you have know that it's someone's experience themselves may be part of or
What do you mean? The virtual
this
book launches that I do?
no, sorry, the event that happens in your book. So the
I don't know how I come up with them. I'm very much a pantser. I don't really plot any of the
yeah,
things that happen. I kind of just wake up and go to my computer and then I write what happens. I don't know. I mean, there
what
are
do you
certain
usually
things in,
have as a starting point?
yeah, it's so interesting because I think that coming up with a story idea and starting to write that story idea, for me, it's about passion and also timing.
Mm,
So I have to be very passionate about that subject and about that character who I've maybe been creating in my head. I have to be very passionate about the story I want to tell, because otherwise you can't write, nearly 100,000 words if you're
mm,
not really passionate about the story.
mm.
But then also I need to be, it's about timing. So I can have, 100 different story ideas in a year, but if I'm currently writing a different book, or if I'm promoting that book, or if I'm in edits, I can't start that story.
Yeah,
So I have a very huge list of story ideas that I have. And when it comes to a point where I can start writing a new story, I often look through that.
okay.
And a lot of times it's things that I maybe have heard in the news or something
Mm,
somebody has told me. Sometimes a story emerges from a character and just something that is happening with a character. Um, so a lot of times it happens like that. So I start with a premise, an idea, and then I start working on a character that would fit really well and really struggle within that premise so that you can
yeah.
get that tension of like what's going to happen. And from there, I don't plot anything. I just go and I start writing, and it just sort of develops organically each day. And usually within 4 to 5 or 6 months or so, I have a rough, like a very rough draft, like a very, very rough first draft. And then I start chipping away at it, and I edit, and I kind of, it's like an ice sculpture that I have to really chip away at and form. because I don't plot, I just write. It means that I have a lot more edits to do, but I'm not really sure where every single event comes from. I think maybe there's a bit of, I don't know, maybe things that have happened that I've seen that like embeds in my subconscious somewhere, but mostly it comes from knowing my main character, my protagonist, and their character arc. Is it a positive character arc? Or with Do No Harm, she was very much on a negative character arc, so I knew that she was going to be corrupted along the way. And what choices would she make? So it's about my character and the choices that the character will make within the confines of that plot.
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting to know. So, and on average, how long does it take you to write a book?
It doesn't take long to write the first draft. So like I was saying, maybe 3 to 5 months or so.
Okay.
But it's so messy. I mean, I have to do so many rounds of edits. I do a number of rounds of edits for myself. Then I send it to my agent, and she has me do more rounds of edits. And then it goes to my publisher, and there's more. And then there's copy edits, proofreading edits. So it's about a year altogether of writing, like drafting, writing, editing. It's about a year altogether. But that first draft doesn't usually take me that long. It's 3 to 5 months or so.
Yeah, that's reasonably quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sharon, Sharon says she loves your cover. Very intriguing with the silhouette figure.
Thank you. Is that the one for Do No Harm?
Yeah. So, do you have any say in the cover?
I get some say. My publisher designs it, and then they send me the cover to say, hey, what do you think? Do you want any changes? And then I can kind of go, could you change the color palette? So when they sent this to me, it was actually quite a green cover palette, and I didn't like the green. So we moved it to more like an orangey sort of sepia tone, which I liked, and I found a bit more haunting. And we also changed, I didn't like the font previously, so we changed the font. But the original kind of design is definitely up to my publisher. I mean, I'm not a designer in any way, so I kind of just trust them to give me a few good options, and then I say yes or no. So they're really good about taking my feedback and kind of running with that, but they definitely do the original design, and they're very good at what they do, so I trust them. Yeah.
And I know some books, when they're published in different countries, they have a different cover. Have they done that with yours? Or
yeah, definitely. So with The Night Olivia Fell, actually here, I think I have a copy.
Because I'm not sure which countries one have I got.
So you have the Night Olivia Fell, the UK, Australia one, and this is the American one.
Okay, yeah, so, that's pretty. Yeah, it's quite a lot different, isn't it?
It's very, very different. Yeah. So I'm not sure what makes them choose the different colors. I would imagine it's something to do with the audiences and how they're positioning it. But that happens if you have sold foreign rights to a different country's publisher, and then that publisher takes on the book and does its own like branding and marketing and stuff.
Yeah,
that's what happened.
So that's why. Yeah. And could you tell us what you're working on at the moment?
I can't tell you too much because at the moment I'm just writing, so it hasn't sold. It hasn't. I have no. Yeah, but it still is within the same genre, and it's still, there's a murder involved and a woman who's trying to find out what happened. I know that's incredibly vague.
So, because you haven't had, does that mean that you don't have a contract for your next book? So will the agent so the agent will then be trying to find someone for that? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so with each book, so usually you sell each book as a standalone. I mean, sometimes when you first start, you'll have a 2-book deal, but quite a lot of the time they're 1-book deals. So Do No Harm was a 1-book deal. So now I'm working on my next one, and we'll go out and try to sell it when I finish. Yeah.
And Sharon's wondering if it actually costs you money to get the first book published or to get your book published.
So it doesn't.
Is it more paying your agent?
Oh no, you never pay an
You
agent. You
don't
would
pay.
never ever
Okay.
pay an agent. Only dodgy agents would do
Okay.
that. But once the book has sold, then the agent gets a cut. Like
Okay.
usually it's around
Yeah.
10%. It depends on if you're selling to world rights or just that country, North American rights. But they do typically get a cut of your royalties and your sales after it's sold, but never before.
Yeah. Okay.
Then when it goes out and it is published, the author can choose to pay for their own publicist, because quite a lot of times publishers, you know, they're very busy and they might not be able to dedicate a lot of time to it. So some authors, if they've gotten a big advance, they might tend to pay for an external publicist to just help out. But yeah, typically you don't have to. It just depends on how much publicity you want. Really.
And then there's some people who self-publish, which I presume must cost them to do that.
Yeah, I mean, self-publishing is different. I haven't self-published, and the simple reason is because I wanted to do traditional publishing where they do the distribution for me and the marketing for me. With self-publishing, you do get all of the income that's coming in.
Yeah,
you have to
but there's a lot more.
Pay to have an editor look at it and cover design, and then you have to distribute it, and that's very, very tricky to distribute. And I wanted that to be up to the publisher, because distributing and trying to get bookshops to buy the book and to stock the book, that's hard. I mean, you have to have kind of brand recognition for a book publisher to go, yeah, I'll stock your book in my shop, because it costs them money too. So that's where I suppose the extra publicity can help.
Yeah. Sharon's wondering what genre you liked reading when you were a child.
When I was a child, I did read a lot of mystery. So I read like Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, those sorts of books. But then I also read just sort of general fiction, like Sweet Valley High.
They all sound
Club,
like, you know. There are a lot of ones that I read.
I loved reading.
Yeah.
But definitely, even then, I was reading a lot of mystery and suspense. I like being able to read something that has a bit of a puzzle that I can sort of think about and solve as I'm reading the book. I really enjoy that. I always have.
Yeah. And what do you like reading now? And I'm wondering if maybe there's something you have been reading lately that you'd like to recommend to us.
I mostly read thrillers now. Even now, I mostly read thrillers or mystery. Every once in a while, I delve into nonfiction. So what I'm reading right now is a nonfiction book, and I have it right here. It's called The Dark Side of the Mind. And it's about a forensic psychologist, and she just kind of gives her perspective and her life as a forensic psychologist, interviewing some very bad people and the reasons why, the kind of psychology behind why they've done the things they do. I also finished up a book, a thriller that I loved. This is by Catherine Mackenzie. It's called 6 Weeks to Live. And it's out in, I believe it's in May, but I'm not sure when it's out in Australia. But in America, it's out in May. And it's about a woman who gets a diagnosis that she has a brain tumor and she only has 6 weeks to live. But then she finds out that somebody has been poisoning her. So she's trying to find out who it was that was poisoning her before she runs out of time. And it's really thrilling. It's also really emotional. And I think I love books that not only have that sort of thriller component, but also there's a bit of emotion, you know, a relationship or a draw between these characters that makes you really feel for them. So I love that. And it was very much within the books that I love to read.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one. I'll have to add it to my list.
Definitely.
Anne's wondering if you have had the same publisher for each of your books.
I have, yeah. I've been with Simon & Schuster, their imprint gallery, for all of my books so far.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Could you tell us what you think being a successful writer means?
Successful? Oh, I have debated this question a lot. Success is so nebulous, right? Like one person can think somebody is successful and that person might not feel like they're very successful. So it's really about branding and perception. And I think for me personally, I think success for an author has to come from putting your value internally rather than what people think externally, because externally it might come across that any author has this high level of maybe sales or royalties or movie deals or whatever. But really, if they're not feeling happy about themselves, then is that success? So I think we all have to figure out our own idea of what success is. And for me, it's each book that I write. So every project that I write, I put myself into it, and I'm really, really happy with Do No Harm. Like, it's a very personal book to me. I worked very hard on it, and I love it. So that's, to me, that's success. And I've had a lot of people that have said, God, this book has meant so much to me. And it deals with the opioid epidemic in America. So it's been, it just opens up so many new bits of information that I hadn't thought of. And to me, that's success. So I think it really comes down to every individual defining what success is. And then, and that doesn't mean like you can't reach for higher things, but just being clear about what those levels of success are and where you're going.
Yeah, that's a really good answer.
Just being grounded, I think.
Yeah. Anne's wondering if the first book you showed us just before, the non-fiction one, are you using that as research for your current book you're writing?
No, I really like psychology books. This one, The Dark Side of the Mind. I'm fascinated by the way people work, by the way our minds work. Some people can be so evil, and you're like, why are they like that? And so it just really fascinates me, the science behind why someone is the way they are. Like, did they have some head trauma when they were a child, or like one person had a brain tumor, or were they born bad? That sort of thing really fascinates me. Medical nonfiction books really fascinate me.
Yeah. And could you tell us what you think makes a good story?
A good story to me is a plot that is exciting, that is thrilling, and has a lot of questions, so that I can be trying to unravel the mystery as I go. But also, at the same time, I feel really connected to the character, and I feel really emotional about their journey and the relationships that they have, and by their successes and their failures impact me emotionally. And I think about the book after I've put it down. I'm like, God, what would I do in that situation? That to me is a successful book. And that's my favorite type. Thrilling but emotional.
Yeah. And do you read your reviews?
I did with Olivia for the most part. I don't anymore. Like I was saying before, I think that opinions for books are so subjective. So I try not to get bogged down by any specific review. I do look at my overall star rating, because I think we can all improve, and we can all go, okay, well, I want this next book to be better in whatever way. But I don't look at specific reviews anymore, because I do feel like they affect me personally. Like, everybody's obviously entitled to their own opinion. But if I look at one review and it's like, this is the worst book I've ever read, I go, oh, I worked on that for a year, man. So I try not to read individual reviews.
Yeah. And do you find that a lot of readers reach out to you about like maybe things that have touched them or that they've related to? Or
yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't say a lot, but definitely some people reach out to me, particularly with Do No Harm, because I think because of the topic, writing amidst the opioid epidemic. I think it's a huge thing in America. And so it's, addiction, and that all of the craziness that's happening within the healthcare industry is a big deal to a lot of people. So I've had more people reaching out to me for that, and just saying this really impacted me, or here's how I felt. And so definitely some.
Yeah. And do you have time to respond back to readers who reach out to you?
I respond to every single person that reaches out to me, and I also try to respond to every single social media message. If somebody comments on anything that I've posted, I respond to every single one. I think that's important. I think it's just good manners as a human, but also I like connecting with my readers, and I like connecting with people who like books, because you know what? I like books. I'm a bookworm, first and foremost. So it's important to me to connect with people who have not only read my work, but also are reading books that I'm reading.
Yeah. And how have you felt writing over the last year compared to like pre-COVID and that? Has it been harder for you? And
it's been very hard, because I have 2 young children that are at home who I've been homeschooling. So for a while I was having to get up at about 5 o'clock in the morning and try to write before I then got offline and then pivoted to homeschooling and teaching. And that was hard. I mean, it's a huge, you know, mind shift to go from trying to be creative and write about murder and stuff to trying to teach, you know, the alphabet. That's all they're very different things. So it's been really tricky. I think it's been maybe good for my children because my boys are 5 years apart. So they're very different ages. And I think that they would have just gone off on their own paths at school with their different friends. But because they've been home for the last year, their relationship has really grown and they've become friends. Like they have sleepovers and stuff. So that's been really nice to see. So I think, you know, every cloud has its silver lining. But for me personally, trying to get any work done, that's been hard. It's had to mostly be put on hold while I focus on family and children and that sort of thing, which I think has happened to a lot of people. Of course, our lives are very different, you know. But it doesn't mean like it's like this forever. I think that's the thing is, you know, with anything that is tough, it is not forever, you know. And next month, next year, it can all be different, you know.
That's true. And could you let people watching know how they can keep up to date with what's happening and maybe contact you if they want to? And
yeah, so my social medias are Twitter, it's Christina Mac79. Also Instagram, it's Christina Mac79. Facebook is at Christina McDonald author. And then I also have a book club that I run, and that's on my website. So if you go to Christina-McDonald.com, I do interviews with authors every month, and you get a chance to win a signed copy of their book. And I do sometimes 3, but usually anywhere from 1 to 3 interviews each month. So if you sign up there, you just go to the link that says join my book club, and you'll get my emails and you'll get the interviews and a chance to win.
Sounds great. So thanks so much for joining us. It's been great chatting to you. And thanks everyone who joined in and asked some questions.
Thank you.
Thanks. And bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.